Okay, well, next, what I want to cover here is I want to talk about a very interesting topic, kind of the neuroanatomy and neurochemistry of sleep. Can we actually go to specific brain regions and centers and say, this area controls waking, this area controls sleeping, this area controls REM? The answer to that question is actually kind of. Sleep is a very complex behavior, and there are a lot of individual differences. Neuroscientists, who are the people studying the brain and sleep waves, are the ones doing this. They have found that there are a whole lot of chemicals, a whole lot of structures, a whole lot of connections here. But once again, this is an ADB class, and I kind of want to give you kind of the ballpark here and give you some sense of what is going on in the brain. So I am going to try to reduce it here, much like in the same way when we get to the eating section. So here's what we generally know. One of the things we generally know that seems to be very important in sleeping and waking is a structure called the locus coeruleus, which is identified on page 318. The locus coeruleus seems to have a lot of norepinephrine in it. And if you look at figure 9.11, in certain studies what they do is they measure the firing rate, the action potentials of neurons in this locus coeruleus when an animal is waking and when it's sleeping, and even for humans as well, I believe. And what they basically find is this locus coeruleus, when it gets activated, is when somebody wakes up. And so this seems to be kind of the arousal center of the brain. Norepinephrine is the key neurotransmitter in here. So if you give products that increase norepinephrine levels, that's going to act like a stimulant and wake the organism up. So when people take amphetamines and cocaine, they cause the release of more norepinephrine, and that's why they tend to wake people up. Dopamine products many times do this as well. So the locus coeruleus is kind of structure number one. You can see the picture of the rat where it is. The general area where a lot of these structures are is an area called the reticular formation in the brain. So, and that is structure number one. Now, structure number two is very interesting. It's called the raphe nucleus. Not on 318. Let's see where they put that one for you. I think it's a few pages later. Your book doesn't do the best job in the world on some of this stuff. I actually went and found some other materials as well. 326, the raphe nucleus. The raphe nucleus is kind of in the more in the hindbrain part of the brain. Didn't say that too well. In the hindbrain, if you will, and it actually contains a lot of serotonin. Very interesting, though. I've actually copied a few abstracts for you. If you look at the end of the agenda, the first one was actually the key study that actually determined norepinephrine is the key neurotransmitter that works in the locus coeruleus because it seems to be activated when an organism wakes up. The second one, very interesting. Actually, let's go to the third one here. The third one, raphe nuclei. And it was very interesting what they noted here. You would think that serotonin, from what you folks know, hey, serotonin must be the neurotransmitter that's linked to us falling asleep. That's a little too simplistic for the field of neuroscience, and it really doesn't work that way. What they basically found is as you get more and more tired and go into sleep, it's actually serotonin levels are going down. It seemed that right as you end REM sleep, serotonin levels go up. Right at the end of REM sleep, maybe to keep you in a state of sleep, but just not REM sleep. So the role of serotonin is not well determined. It's not so simple to just say, oh yeah, if I take a glass of warm milk, which has tryptophan will be converted to serotonin, and then I will sleep well. The final neurotransmitter that I'd like to talk about a bit with you here is the neurotransmitter known as acetylcholine. Another structure of your brain, and your book didn't do a very good job of this. It talks about an area called the basal forebrain region, but that's not the key structure here. But another key area is an area called the pons, which is also in the hindbrain. There seems to be a lot of acetylcholine in this particular area of your brain. Actually, I'm not doing this quite right, because the basal forebrain is a second structure that actually has a lot of acetylcholine. The basal forebrain is kind of in the front of your frontal lobe, if you will, and this also has a lot of acetylcholine. One of the things I can tell you about this is that acetylcholine seems to be very, very important right as you go into REM sleep. What seems to happen is people go into REM sleep, and if you actually turn your book back to that thing about REM sleep, page 320, if you actually start looking at brainwaves when people are about to enter REM sleep, there is something called PGO waves, which basically says there are spikes in the EEG, first in the pons, which is kind of the back part of the hindbrain, and acetylcholine being there, then in the LGN, which is part of the thalamus, and then in the occipital lobe. Very interesting. Do any of you know what the occipital lobe does? The occipital lobe is in charge of vision. And so the idea with these PGO waves is maybe acetylcholine is telling the brain, hey, go into REM sleep and start having dreams. So it seems acetylcholine is very much tied to this. Acetylcholine, when it's released, actually tends to make people look very activated even though you're in your deepest stage of sleep. So it's very, very interesting here, the notion about acetylcholine. Basically, it's being used when you're awake and paying attention, and also when you're in REM sleep. So acetylcholine and the types of neurons that are used for that are called cholinergic neurons. So that's about all the information I want to share with kind of the neuroanatomy. We've also talked about previously the role of melatonin and the pineal gland, so that's part of this as well.